Hello, Expat Kingdom. This is Lane Livingston, and today I'm going to be speaking to Ann Fouts, who has an amazing story to share. A lot of really neat things. She actually lives a bit of a nomadic lifestyle, and so today we're going to be kind of diving into that. But she's also authored a book regarding Ecuador, so it'll be really neat to kind of dive into that too. So first of all, just wanted to say welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on, and I'm really excited to be speaking to you today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I thought we'd just go ahead and just dive right in on the nomadic lifestyle and start asking, or just kind of talking about how you got started with that sort of a lifestyle. Because I think it's one of those things that a lot of people there's definitely a group of people that aspire to have that kind of lifestyle, and maybe there's hurdles or things that are kind of preventing them from that. But let's just kind of start with how you actually got started into that kind of a lifestyle.
Well, I think I was primed for the nomadic lifestyle from the get go because I am what they call a third culture kid. If you're not familiar with that term, it basically means somebody who was raised for a significant portion of their developmental years outside of their passport culture. And in my case, that was Mexico. And the way I became a third culture kid was actually I was kidnapped and taken to Mexico with my sister. And that sounds really horrible, but it was actually a good thing because my abductor was actually my mother, and she was protecting me from, or protecting us from, an abusive father. And we had actually asked her not to make us go back with him. He had obtained custody through some unethical means, a lot of lies and so forth. So she was protecting us. She took us to Mexico, and that ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me because it, it gave me a perspective on life, an ability to adapt to new cultures. Obviously, I learned Spanish. So I think Mexico is really the best thing that ever happened to me. And ever since then, I've moved frequently throughout my life. The longest I've ever lived in one place is 3.5 years. And
Wow.
during that time, while I was living in that one house, I met the man who is now my husband. And he was living in a motorhome at the time and traveling around doing these different contract jobs. And at the time we started dating, he was between jobs. And he kind of jokingly asked me one time, how do you feel about dating a jobless, homeless man? And I said, it's awesome. It's exactly what I want because you're jobless and you're homeless by choice, and I love the freedom that comes with that. And we've since gotten married. I'm in a motorhome right now. We travel around. He works. He's actually not a jobless homeless bum. He works very hard when he is working, but then we take several months off each year and travel.
That's
So
fantastic.
we move around the country, and then we live in other parts of the world when we're not working. So
That's really exciting. So let's back up just a little bit then, because you kind of dropped a bombshell on us with the fact that you were kidnapped, and before we actually got started with the interview, you were kind of describing it to me, and you explained that you were basically kind of on the run for the time that you were down there. So how long?
yes.
What age were you when you got down there? How long were you there, and were you bouncing around a lot of Mexico, or how did that look?
Yeah, sure. We were on the run for 7 years, and 5 of those years were in Mexico. I was 8 years old when we went down there. And so I was there between the ages of 8 and 13. We spent most of our time in one region of Mexico, but we lived in several different towns down there. The state we were in is Michoacan, which unfortunately these days is in the news a lot for the drug problems. At the time, though, it was great. We felt very safe and very happy there. And so the town that I like the most, and the town that I still consider my hometown, is Pátzcuaro. It's kind of hard to call any place your hometown when you've moved
Right,
your whole life.
right.
Uh, there really is no sense of hometown anywhere, but the place that I feel like is most my home is Pátzcuaro, Michoacan, Mexico.
Yeah. Okay. I can kind of relate to that because I'm originally from Texas, and as a kid, we bounced around all over Texas. all over Georgia, down to Florida, back to Georgia, and so I get it. But I probably consider, even though I've lived in Georgia most of my life, I probably still consider this one little town in East Texas kind of like home. It's like where I feel the most at home, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
So I get that. So then you really feel like probably that kind of upbringing and that situation is really what's probably shaped you to be so drawn to this nomadic lifestyle today.
Very definitely so, yes.
Okay.
I don't think I would be living this kind of a lifestyle if that had never happened.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So what kind of places have you bounced around, in the more recent years as far as globetrotting? Because I know obviously Ecuador is one of the big spots we're going to talk about. What
Yes.
other kind of locations have you bounced around?
Well, my husband and I have worked in Antarctica, so we spent some time living at the South Pole Station. So that's probably the most remote place that we've ever been. We have also traveled to every continent except for Asia. So we've spent a little bit of
Wow.
time in Africa. My husband's been to Africa once. I've been there 3 times now, various different parts of the continent. Um, I have also previously been to Ecuador before this trip. This last one, I spent some time in the Galapagos Islands on a previous trip, and we haven't done a whole lot of Europe yet. We spent a little bit of time in England. I've touched on France, a little bit of Romania, but most of our travels have been in Latin America, Mexico, Central America, and now Ecuador.
Wow, that's great. All right, so let's jump into Ecuador then. So tell us the title of your book and what it really focuses on.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The ebook that I wrote is called Live Like a Local in Loja. And like the title says, it's about living like a local in Loja. So, um, Loja is a town it's a city in southern Ecuador, and that's where my husband and I lived most recently. And it's it's a place that is attracting the attention of the world as maybe the next hotspot for expats.
Okay.
A lot of people are kind of curious about it. Cuenca is obviously the most famous and most popular
Right.
expat destination right now.
Right.
But a lot of people are saying, well, I'm interested in Ecuador, but I want to live a more local lifestyle. I want to make local friends. And so Loja is coming up as an option for that kind of a lifestyle for a lot of people. And there isn't a whole lot of information
Right.
out there yet on Loja. So when we were living down there, I was writing blog posts, mostly just for friends and family, but I started getting a lot of questions from random readers just asking me more information about Loja because there's not a lot out there. And after that point, I decided to write the book to answer a lot of those questions that I was getting.
That's great. Wow. So how did you guys end up in Loja?
Well, we wanted to spend some time in South America, so we kind of were looking at different options for where in South America to go. We wanted to do kind of the slow travel thing and spend a couple of months at least in one place
Yeah.
and just really experience a place in depth that way. So after looking at different options, the cost of living, what would fit with our budget, and so forth, we decided on Ecuador, and then I started whittling down from there. Where shall we go? And I was kind of looking especially at the mountain region of Loja because we both love the mountains. We like hiking. And I found an article about Loja and found it very intriguing. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of information about the city, but what little I did read, I learned that there were not very many expats there, which for us was actually a big plus because we wanted to immerse ourselves in the
Hmm.
local culture. And so we decided that we would go ahead and go to Loja. We didn't really know how we would find a place because we couldn't find anything online, but we figured we would just get there and then figure it out once we got there. So, and luckily Keith and I, my husband and I both speak Spanish, so it's easier for us to just go do that.
Yeah, submerge yourself and get in. Yeah, that reminds me, kind of like what you were saying as far as online and all that. When I took my first trip to Uruguay, it was a 5 week long trip. My wife and I took, and when I started researching it and thinking about actually going down there. I don't remember. I think I first started looking into it because my brother-in-law is from Uruguay. So I started looking it up online, and you really couldn't find anything in English. Everything that I had to find was in Spanish. But
Mm-hmm.
as I started finding a little bit more and a little bit more, I just became more and more intrigued by it, and went down there and fell in love with it. But that's really cool. So and the thing is too, we did something. It sounds like we did something similar when we got down there. We knew where we were going to stay at first. But basically, booked a hotel for the first night or two, and
Mm-hmm.
then from there we didn't have any reservations. We rented a car. We just drove. Each time we got into a new town, we were basically trying to find a hotel and just kind of figuring our way. And it was a phenomenal trip. Probably the best trip we've had.
Yeah.
So then when you got into Loja and all that, I mean, just kind of walk us through that as far as, were you, was it, was it exciting? Was it scary? Like what, did it meet your expectations? Just kind of share it with us, that experience of just kind of, jumping in and really not knowing what you were in for.
Yeah, so we flew to Guayaquil and then took a bus from Guayaquil up to Loja, which is about a 9 hour bus ride. It takes all day to do.
Wow.
And so we got to Loja in the evening, pretty much just took a taxi. We had made a reservation for the first couple of nights and went straight to the hotel with the plans that the next morning we would start house hunting. And I didn't really know what to expect because, like I said, there's not much out there. Um, I had learned that Loja has a couple of universities, that they have a symphony, which I thought was really cool. So, and it's the cultural capital of Ecuador. We found a few Spanish videos on YouTube where we watched, so we kind of knew what some of the parks looked like and some of the things that they highlight in the video. The hotel that we stayed in was right downtown. So the first thing I noticed when we got there was the noise because it's right downtown. There was quite a bit of traffic and so forth. And it was a little louder than what I expected. I kind of expected it to feel more like a smaller town.
Hmm.
And right where we were, it felt more like a city because we were right downtown. Um, and, but once we got there, just it's a beautiful place. The city itself, it's got its areas of town, the plazas and so forth, which are beautiful. But the thing that I think really makes it is the surrounding mountains. It's down in a valley, and there's mountains all around. You can't get in and out of Loja without going over a mountain pass, whatever direction you go. And it's just really beautiful.
Wow.
So,
Well, so describe I guess a little bit more. Just try to take us into Loja and really experience it because you were talking about kind of like the downtown.
mhm.
What you were describing there kind of reminds me of Ambato. I don't know when I went to Ambato, it's like outside of the downtown area, it's pretty quiet, low key, sleepy town kind of feel. But then when you're on the little like I don't know, 5 block stretch. Maybe maybe it's more or less than that, but
Mhm.
it feels like a very bustling, loud, noisy, dirty city.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what I'm picturing from what you described. Is that accurate or
Yeah. Yeah, I
okay?
would say that's quite accurate. The downtown area of Loja is very busy, very active. Once the shops open up late morning until in the evening, it's just a happening place. A lot of cars coming, it's just steady traffic. It's just, yeah, very vibrant, active downtown area. But once you get out of that downtown area, the neighborhoods are quiet. It's a fairly peaceful city. It's a city of about 200,000 people,
Okay.
and it's quite sprawling. I mean, it's very concentrated in the valley of because this, like I said, this whole city sits in a valley. But then as you go up the mountainsides and kind of in the foothills and in the ravines, the more you go, the more you see. It's just kind of a sprawling city.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, I would say about 200,000 people. Um, it's at 7,000 feet elevation, which makes the temperature quite pleasant. And the temperature, like other places in Ecuador, is fairly steady
Right.
year round
Right.
for the elevation. Right there, it's, I would say, in the 60s to low 70s most of the year for the high.
That's great.
Yeah, it feels very comfortable. It's not, it never feels cold, and there's just no extreme temperatures in either direction.
Sure.
So
I'm guessing it's probably like most, I mean, or like the rest of Ecuador, really. It's got its rainy season as well.
it does. And we were actually there for the rainy season started within a couple of weeks of our arrival. Excuse me. So pretty much you learn during rainy season to, whenever you go out, carry an umbrella with you because at any moment the skies could open.
Yeah.
It does not rain during rainy season. It's not like it rains constantly, but it does rain practically every day.
Gotcha.
So most of the time it's nice. It's not raining. It's fine. You can be out walking around, but then it doesn't. Yeah, the weather can change fairly quickly, and the rain will come, and it'll rain for, an hour or two for the day, and then it'll go away. It doesn't typically rain for hours or days and on end,
Gotcha.
but it will rain every day during rainy season.
I see. Okay. Sounds kind of like Florida then, as far
Yeah.
as you get the scattered showers or whatever, and moves on. So you mentioned that basically you're in the valley of the Andes Mountains, so you're surrounded by mountains. Are any of those, do you know, in that surrounding or in that immediate area, volcanoes, or is it really just mountains?
In that area, it's just mountains.
Okay.
There are no volcanoes nearby. It's the hiking there is great. Right outside of Loja, there's a national park called Podocarpus National Park, and it's a great place for hiking and bird watching. There are basically three entrances to the park. One of them is near Loja, and the other one you have to go over the pass and down toward the Amazon basin, and it's near Zamora to get to the other entrance. And then there's another entrance down by Vilcabamba, which is south of Loja. So it's that's just one example of the great hiking that's in that area. And my husband and I, that's one of our favorite things to do is go hiking. So Loja was kind of a dream in that any direction outside the city, or walk outside go to the edge of the city, walk until the roads turn into dirt roads, and eventually you'll find a trail and you can go up and just hike up in the mountains. And it's amazing. There are houses up in the mountains.
Yeah.
It's just no
Sure.
road access. I mean,
Yeah.
people live way up in the mountains, and
Yeah,
it's
and
just fun to go
it's
hike.
funny because it's like it's such a foreign idea for us as Americans because we're so used to everything, having to have the roads, you're close to all the conveniences and all that kind of stuff. But I guess if you explore enough in the United States, you'll still find people kind of off the beaten path like that too.
Right.
So tell me then, in Loja, how are things like medical and schools, those kind of things that are probably going to be important to anybody considering a move there.
Yeah. As far as medical, thankfully, we didn't have any personal experience with the medical system because we didn't have any big medical needs while we were down there. But one of our neighbors, we had a couple that lived in our apartment building. They were from Spain, and while they were there, he was a professor at one of the universities in Loja. And while they were there, they got pregnant with their first baby,
Oh, wow.
which was born there. And so I had a chance to talk to them. How's the medical system? How do you feel going in and for the checkups and the ultrasounds and all of that? And they said they were very impressed. They loved the level of care that they got. They felt that the facilities were modern and good. I talked to another expat more recently who said he's had issues with skin cancers his whole life. He said he went into the local hospital there, got excellent treatment, and then They actually treated it, cleared most of it up, had to have a little bit of it operated. He said he was very happy with the care that he got. But I hear mixed stories. I hear other people who have said that they had to leave because they could not find the level of care that they needed. So it sounds to me like for most basic or routine needs, you'll find what you need in Loja. But if you have a real serious medical issue, then you might need to move to a larger city or even back to your home country.
Right, right. Which is
So,
honestly, I mean, exactly what you just described has been what I've experienced with our, my wife's family in Ecuador. They kind of have mixed reviews as well. You have really
yeah.
good experiences, and then there's also, for maybe the larger things or the more serious things. We've got friends in Ecuador that basically, for like cancer type stuff, they've had to come back up here. So it's just, and they were in Bahia. They live in Bahia. They had a terrible experience in Bahia. Ended up coming back here, got really good treatment. But like I guess to your point, the more basic, maybe things you should be good. But it seems like for larger things, you're probably going to want to come back.
Right, or at least move to Quito or Cuenca or one of the bigger cities where they're going to have more medical options.
Sure. Yep.
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and then you said there are some universities there that are pretty good.
Yeah. I think that the population of Loja is probably very well educated as compared to average because they do have several universities in the city, and I didn't really interact with very many people with school age children, so I can't really speak to the educational facilities for kids. Although I have heard that they're the one thing I have heard is that, excuse me, a little thing in my throat here. The one thing that I have heard is that they need to improve their English teaching. But other than that, I would imagine it's pretty good. But they do have some universities, including one that's considered one of the top in the country. And I've heard, I didn't actually confirm this, but I've heard that out there, the largest online university in the entire continent of South America.
Oh, wow.
So,
very interesting.
Yeah.
What do you know what drives the economy in Loja?
Loja is, I'm not sure what the number one driver of the economy is, but like I said, it's a very big university town, and it's also considered the cultural capital of Ecuador.
Yeah, so maybe that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, so they have a school of music there, which produces some of the country's finest musicians, and they have a lot of musical events there. One of the things that I really liked about it is I like going to the symphony and things like that. And Loja has a symphony with free performances almost weekly.
Wow.
So
that's really neat.
Yeah, that was awesome, and they're very good.
Wow, that's really cool.
So, yeah.
I enjoy symphonies myself. That's really cool. Well, all right. Well, so let's move on then to, I guess if you could just kind of share with me what were your favorite things about Loja?
Oh man, I don't even know where to start because there's so much I loved about Loja. I would say number one, the people. The people there are generous and friendly and cheerful. It's one of those places that I don't know. It seems like here in the U.S. we kind of are. It feels like we're going downhill. Like there's this feeling of negativity in the U.S. Like, oh, our economy is suffering, and things are just going. We're just kind of on a downhill slide. Mm-hmm. And in Ecuador, it's like the opposite of that. Like in Loja, I felt like there was this feeling of, good things are to come. This like we only have positive things to look forward to. Just this positive, uplifting kind of feeling about the town.
Yeah.
And the people were really generous and friendly. I never felt like we were being taken advantage of, or like they were just trying to get the most money they could out of us, which in some places in Latin America, you do kind of feel that way.
Well, in Quito, you'll experience that. You know, in Quito or any of the big tourist areas, you'll definitely experience that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, tourist areas, and that's the thing about Loja. It's not a huge tourist area, so people there. I felt like by and large, I mean, with few exceptions, we were treated fairly, just the same prices as the locals when we went shopping, and just generous. So we'd go to the open air marketplace, and not only would they give us the same price as everybody else, but sometimes they'd say, "Oh, here they throw in some extra things for us." You
Right.
know, just generous, giving, kind people. Making friends there was pretty easy to do. We made a point to go out and interact with the community as much as we could, and we had invitations to people's homes and just the friends that we made there. So I would say number one, the people was my favorite thing, and I could mention other things. The music that I talked about earlier, that was awesome. The hiking opportunities, just you know the being able to go out and hike around in the mountains and just the beautiful scenery there. That was awesome. The abundance of fresh and exotic fruits. I, like I said earlier, I grew up in Mexico,
Yeah.
so I feel like I've seen a lot of exotic fruits before, but I had no idea.
Yeah. Ecuador. Yeah, I know. Ecuador is phenomenal when it comes to that.
Yeah,
It's
I
insane.
mean, I'm not exaggerating. Every single week we went to the marketplace. There's an open air market weekly in our near our neighborhood. We would go. We would load up our grocery bags with as much as both of us could carry for about $20, and take it back. And every single week there was something there that I had never seen before in my
Wow,
life.
that's really cool.
It's just yeah, it's really cool. I loved that. The cost of living is very good, so I liked that, and the safety there is good. I felt really, I never felt vulnerable or threatened in any way while we were there. So
That's awesome. That's invaluable. So, if you don't mind, can you give us kind of an idea from a rent perspective what you were paying at that time?
yeah. Now here's one of the things that was the biggest challenge about Loja, and that was finding accommodations that were furnished at a reasonable price. While we were there, you can find unfurnished apartments for probably 200, 300, and maybe 400 on the higher end if you're in the downtown area.
One
Um,
bedroom,
yeah,
maybe
one,
two.
two, even three-bedroom apartments
Wow.
for pretty cheap. If you go right downtown, you're going to be paying a little bit more because that's they place more value on those properties. If you're going toward the outskirts of town, you might pay as little as less than 200 a month for an
Wow.
unfurnished place.
Yeah.
But furnished places were harder. And last year when we were there was only basically one option available on Airbnb, and we ended up negotiating 600 a month, which was way too much. Most people told us that we should have been paying half of
Right.
what we were paying,
Sure.
and what we had was a two-bedroom furnished apartment.
Gotcha.
And since then, there's another expat who has started working with locals to put their properties, furnish them, and put them on Airbnb. So there are more options in the last year than there were when we were there.
Gotcha.
So it should be easier. Some of those places that are currently listed on Airbnb for furnished will go for 300 a month. So,
So
and
it
that's
sounds
for a
like,
little studio apartment.
and this person that you're referring to, it sounds like this expat is
Hmm.
probably he's working with the locals then, like
Yeah.
actual. It's probably a combination of other expats and locals.
Yeah, what he has done, his name's James, and he's been living in Loja for about 2 years now. And we didn't know him at the time we were there, but I found him later when I was looking up information on my book and saw, oh, there are more listings on Airbnb. So I got a hold of him and interviewed him for my book. And what he has done is the lady that he rents his apartment from has another unit that became available. She'd been renting it to somebody. That person moved out, and he talked to her about, hey, let's furnish it and put it on Airbnb. And he keeps a small percentage, but this isn't really a moneymaker for him. This is just something that he does to, he's retired, fills up a little bit of his time.
Right.
He makes a little bit, but it's not worth really to do as a living. But so he furnished this place for her and then advertised it on Airbnb. So he kind of coordinates it, but it's her apartment. And then some of her friends also had some places that they wanted to rent out. So he's done this for them, kind of just been the person to write out the descriptions, put up the pictures, and communicate with the people that inquire on Airbnb, but they're the ones that run it and manage it.
Yeah, that's great.
So
That's
yeah.
really neat. Well, okay, so let's move then. Give me the opposite then. Like, what are the things that you did not like about Loja?
Well, there's really not a whole lot that I didn't like. I mentioned the housing was a challenge, so that was probably the biggest frustration when we got there. It took us a while to find a place. When we did find a place, it cost more than what we had been expecting to pay. And this is just one of the things with the Latin American culture. You have to be aware that things are not going to be as efficient and as timely as what you might expect back in the US. Mm-hmm. So if you need something, you might not get it right away. And we discovered some problems with our apartment and talked to the landlords, and they said, oh yeah, we'll come tomorrow and fix it. And, tomorrow doesn't mean tomorrow. And so, yeah, we ran into some of those kinds of things. But you just have to be aware when you go to really anywhere in Latin America, including in Ecuador, that's kind of the way things are.
Right.
So you just need to be patient.
Right.
So, and then I would say for many expats, this wasn't a problem for us, but for some people, just the fact that there is no expat community there could be a drawback, because all the infrastructure that comes with that, English-speaking services and so forth, are pretty hard to come by in Loja. So that might be a drawback.
And I don't want to go off on a rant on this, but isn't that almost kind of, I guess there's two kinds of expats in a lot of ways, the kind that are, look, I just need to find affordable retirement options, and then probably the other kind that are looking for the adventure and the different culture and all that. So it sounds to me like Loja's going to be then, at the moment at least, more for the kind of person that wants the adventure, wants something completely different than where they are right now.
Exactly.
But
yes.
From what you were saying earlier too, it sounds like Loja has the potential of becoming maybe the next Cuenca, I guess we could say.
Yes. And I kind of hope not,
right?
To be honest.
Right.
I don't want it to become the next Cuenca, and I especially don't want it to become the next Vilcabamba, which is a whole different, where they've just kind of been taken over by expats. But I do think that it has the potential for, having an expat community in the future, and I think it's already kind of headed in that direction. Mm-hmm. I've talked to a lot of locals about this. This is one thing that I really emphasized in my book was, if you're going to go to Loja, you need to learn to live like a local, because one thing that I've discovered is that the locals resent expats who come in, expect everybody to speak English to them, expect everybody to work on the U.S. timetable, to be as efficient as U.S. It just, if you come in with that kind of an attitude, they will resent you.
Right.
And they might not be that way to your face. It almost might seem, and from our cultural perspective, it's going to look passive aggressive, where it looks like they are just, not giving you what you want or whatever. They might be real kind to your face, but then kind of, dig in their heels when it comes to helping you out. So it's really counterproductive to come in with that kind of an attitude. So
Yeah.
yeah, I could go on and on about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is kind of a side note, but I had an experience like that myself. It was my first trip to Ecuador,
Mm.
and basically I woke up one morning. One of my wife's cousins was shaking me and was saying, wake up, they're attacking your country. And right at that time, I saw the second tower get hit,
Ooh.
and we were flying American Airlines the next morning. So,
Oh.
so I had to call, and try. I'm on the phone with them, and basically I ended up getting escalated to a supervisor. All this stuff, okay, we'll get you on a flight out, and we had to go downtown in downtown Quito to the American Airlines office. Well, when we got there, this guy was basically just giving me the runaround, and I was like, "Listen, I spoke to your supervisor. Here's his name. Please get him on the phone. All this stuff." So basically, at the end of the day, they ended up forcing us to pay to fly first class because
Oh.
he didn't like my attitude, and I didn't
Mhm.
like his attitude because I'm like, listen, you're making me go through all this, this stuff, and I've already dealt with it on the phone. This is what I've just come in to take care of this. But like you were
Right.
saying, the efficiency and all those things, it just doesn't exist. And now this was back at 2001, but
Mhm.
um, and that was Quito. But I mean, you're 100% right as far as and he's there, nice to my face and everything,
Mhm.
extremely nice to me. But there's that passive aggressive, kind of thing.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes.
you're spot on with that. I totally get that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So at least it's nice to know somebody else can recognize that I'm not crazy because I experienced
Yeah.
it firsthand.
Yeah.
Um, that's interesting. So what else would you say then are going to be challenges maybe for somebody moving over?
Well, the Spanish obviously is going to be a huge challenge. If you don't speak Spanish already, then um, you need to plan to at least learn when you arrive, if nothing else. If they see that you're making an effort, that in itself makes a huge difference.
Yeah,
But if you just go in with this attitude expecting them to do all the work and you are not learning their language, that's not going to bode well for you. So yeah, it's I would say Spanish, the cultural thing, just like I mentioned, this kind of feeling that they might be sweet to your face, but if you are being pushy or screaming at
right.
them, um, they're going to do everything they can to delay things as long as possible.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, don't try to. It's
Force
just it
things,
makes it
right?
worse than if you just keep your cool, you know.
Yeah,
And then I think the last piece of advice I could give, or one of the challenges is, a lot of people go down there thinking, they'll read about it and say, "Oh, this sounds great. I'm going to go down," and then they make plans to make a permanent move before really getting to know the area. And I think um, you would really do well, even if it might cost a little bit more up front, to spend some time there. Make sure that it's at high altitude. Make sure you can handle the altitude. Make sure that you can live with those cultural differences. I would say, especially for somebody who is a single woman, for example, thinking about moving down there and dealing with the cultural differences, there are a lot of ways that men and women relate to each other in the United States that are perfectly normal that might be seen in a completely different way down there.
hmm
Things that, if you're, for example, if you're a woman and you invited a man into your home just as a friend, here, we don't even think about that. Down there, they might view that as you're interested in more than being just friends.
Gotcha.
So, things like that. You just need to make sure that you can live with those cultural differences, whatever those might be. So, just spending time there, making sure that you can deal with that is huge.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the big things that I really stress. I try to stress to everybody that reaches out to me that's thinking about making a move abroad and all that is really just get down there and experience it first. Don't make any major commitments regarding property and all that. And then, right now you've got the whole situation in Ecuador. I don't know if you've seen with Korea right now, and he's suggesting the 75% basically property gains tax.
Mm,
So, there's all this commotion going on down there about that right now. And that's the thing about South America and Central America is that, it's unfortunately, it's still unstable in that regard. It
yes.
doesn't mean that it's a war zone or that it's, crazy, but it's riskier than the United States right now. That's, just the
Yep.
plain simple fact. And that may reverse one day, maybe 5,
Yep.
10, 20 years from now, we're going to be down there in South America laughing at everybody back over here saying, they couldn't see all this coming or whatever, who knows,
Right.
but that's one of the big things I stress is just don't make stuff permanent. Get down there, experience it,
Mm,
and make sure that you're okay with the pace, with the environment, with the property, with and maybe just because that one particular town doesn't work out for you doesn't mean that another one won't. And so it gives you
exactly.
that flexibility. And I mean, you're the poster child being a nomadic, having that nomadic lifestyle. But that is something on my website on expatkingdom.com. I've got a downloadable. It's 3 tips that every expat should know before moving abroad, and that's one of the big things that I really push. So
Hmm.
anybody that's watching this, if you haven't already got that, go ahead and go in there and download that. Before we close up, too, I wanted to go ahead and just give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the book. For anybody that's interested in learning more about Loja, if you could just kind of give some good info on the book, where they could find out more, maybe where they could get the book. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you've got a special offer for the audience. Is that right?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
So why don't you go ahead and just share that with us?
Sure. Yeah, I have my website at lilyannfouts.com. And what I'm going to do is I have a special page there for your listeners. It's lilyannfouts.com/expatkingdom. And your listeners can go there and I will give them a discount on the ebook. There's a link straight to it from that page. And if they want a 20% discount, they can just enter the offer code that I've put there on that page. And the book, a little bit more about it. It is obviously about Loja. I try to cover a lot of the common questions that I had and that a lot of my readers have contacted me with regarding, how do you find a place to live? How do you get set up with utilities? And, what kinds of things are there to do? How do you go about shopping? And, just the basics of living in Loja. So that's all covered in the book. I also covered some of the things around Loja within a half day's drive or so that you can go and do if you want to get out of the city and see some other areas. I compare Loja to some of the other popular places that expats live, such as Cuenca and Vilcabamba,
Hmm.
and how does that compare? What's better? What's worse? What's different? What kind of person would be best in Loja? Who's it for? Who's it not for?
That's
So
awesome.
I really try to cover that in the book in detail. But in addition to all of the things about Loja, I think that the book is also a really good resource for anybody considering moving to really anywhere in Latin America because one of the biggest chapters in my book is on learning Spanish and strategies for that. So I feel like, that if you're going to be moving to another country, then one of the things that you need to do is learn the culture and learn the language of that country. So I talk a lot about Latin American culture, which applies to not just Ecuador, but many other areas of Latin America as well. And I also talk about learning Spanish. And I touched on my story, my background in Mexico a little bit as well
Hmm.
in the book. So, anybody interested in that can get the book, and that's what's in there.
And I think you mentioned to me too, you're going to be writing a book about that specifically, about the Mexico experience and all that.
Right. Yes, I'm currently writing a book. The working title right now, I don't know that will end up being the title in the end, but it's going to be called 7 Years Running, about our
Great.
experience living on the run, including the 5 years that we spent in Mexico, which I'll tell a lot of detailed stories about that. So anybody kind of curious about what it was like to grow up in Mexico in the late 80s and early 90s uh, can read that book. And what I'll do is I'll put a link. I have a page for anybody wanting to keep track of the progress of that book. I'll put a link to that on the Expat Kingdom page that I'm going to create
Great.
for your
Okay.
listeners.
Now, I just wanted to say too. I mean, regarding the book, I've read most of it, and I would just encourage anybody that's really considering, even if you don't know that Loja is a place for you yet or not, I would get the book because it's well. I mean, it's basically going to cost them a visit to Starbucks essentially,
Yeah.
and you'll have this phenomenal resource of information that'll really give you a good idea on what Loja's like, and if it's somewhere that you want to consider, maybe even just on an exploration trip or something along those lines. So I highly encourage that again. And if you don't mind, give the link again for everybody if they want to go and download the book.
Yes, just go to lilyannfouts.com/expat kingdom.
Great. All right. Well, Lily, I can't thank you so much or enough, for all your time today. And it's just you've got such a neat story, and I can't wait. I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to keep track of where you're going to next and all that. And I know one of the other things you mentioned is that you actually have plans of returning to Ecuador. Is that right?
Yes, in spite of our nomadic lifestyle, which I really enjoy, my husband and I are beginning to think about finding a place where we can set up kind of a home base where we spend at least a significant portion of each year and go back to so that we can have a consistent social life, maybe have a garden,
Sure.
normal things like that.
Yeah.
And Loja is at the top of our list. We really, really love it down there.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you again. I can't thank you enough. And I hope you have a fantastic day.
All right. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thanks.